A recent study found that there were 3 common expectations many retirees have that typically don't go the way that everyone thinks. And here's the thing, if you're counting on any one of these things in retirement and they don't pan out, it'll negatively impact your plan. So in this video, we'll go over each of these retirement expectations, discuss why they rarely play out the way that we think that they will, and I'll show you how to plan your retirement to avoid these common pitfalls. But first, let me show you an example of one of these common retirement expectations and how things play out when it doesn't go right. So Bill and Jane are 62 and have around $1 million saved for retirement. If they start their Social Security benefits right now, they'll have around $4,000 per month coming in. They expect their after-tax living expenses to be around $10,000 per month, including housing and healthcare. If they retire right now, they'll start out with a 6.4% withdrawal rate. Given this, their initial probability of not having to adjust their lifestyle in retirement comes in at 42%. Now that may be a little lower than what Bill and Jane would want to see. I typically like to see my clients come in somewhere between 70 and 90%. But Bill and Jane are getting a little sick of working and they don't want to cut back on their retirement spending goals. So they wonder, what would things look like if they worked part-time until they turned 65? So assuming that they each earn around $50,000 per year on a part-time basis over the next 3 years, how do things look? Well, that extra income makes a huge difference, taking their Monte Carlo odds from 42% to 75%, and their initial withdrawal rate between now and age 65 is essentially 0. And those are completely acceptable numbers in my opinion. But here's where reality might bite them in the behind. According to this recent study, people tend to not work after retirement, where almost 75% of retirees expect to work in some capacity, only around 30% actually do. So what happens to Bill and Jane if their part-time work plan falls through? Let's say that between the two of them, they're only able to take home around $40,000 per year over those first 3 years of retirement. In this case, their Monte Carlo probability drops to 59%. So that's not a 5-alarm fire, but they've certainly brought the possibility of running out of money into play. So how do you keep from letting the post-retirement work trap from punching holes in your retirement plan? Well, the first thing that I would do is assume the worst, or assume the best, and see what your plan looks like with no post-retirement income. If your plan still falls within that comfort zone, well, you're good to go. If something happens in retirement where you can't find the right amount of income, or any income for that matter, things will still be just fine. But if you find that your plan starts to look a little sketchy without any post-retirement income, then it may be a good idea to push that retirement date back a little bit. In the case of Bill and Jane, if they push their retirement back from age 62 to age 64 and plan not to work at all after then their Monte Carlo probability jumps to 81%. So even a couple of years can make a huge difference. Not to mention, at age 64, they can stay on COBRA until they're eligible for Medicare. So now that we've seen how one of these retirement expectations, working after retirement, can hurt your financial plan if things play out like they do in the real world, let's talk about another retirement expectation that tends to not go the way that everyone thinks. Let's go back and revisit our friends Bill and Jane. In this case, their original plan is to retire at 65. In this instance, their initial withdrawal rate comes in at 4.4%, and their Monte Carlo probability of not having to adjust their lifestyle in retirement comes in at 91%. That's a really solid financial plan. But here's where another one of those surprising findings from this study comes into play. According to this study, people tend to retire earlier than they expect. In fact, they tend to retire 3 years earlier on average, where the median expected retirement age is 65, the median actual retirement age is 62. So what happens if both Bill and Jane either choose or are forced to retire 3 years earlier than they'd planned? Well, we're back into our original scenario where they start with a 6.4% withdrawal rate and a 42% probability of not having to adjust their lifestyle. They end up going from a very healthy plan at 65, one where I would encourage them to think about spending a little more, to a plan where they will most likely have to pare back their spending quite a bit to make things work. So how can you keep this retirement curveball from taking you out? It's always a good practice to run your numbers to see what things look like if you retire a few years ahead of schedule, keeping in mind that you may be like most people and retire before you'd planned. In many cases, whether it's downsizing or health issues, retirement isn't a choice. In that case, you still have the power to adjust your plan, your spending, and your investment mix to improvise based on your circumstances. The important thing to keep in mind is that if you're off on your retirement date, it'll probably be to the early side. And this brings me to our final retirement expectation that may not play out the way that we think. So Jeff is in his mid-50s and is a partner at a law firm in a big city. And while he's done very well, most people don't realize that 50 billable hours per week isn't just 50 hours of work. To Jeff, there's no way that he can keep this up for another 10 years. So as part of his plan, Jeff expects to start slowing down in a couple of years. His plan is to gradually reduce his hours, mentor the younger partners in the firm, and bring in new business until he's ready to fully retire. But as it turns out, the glide path retirement is a rarity. In fact, it ends up being a cliff rather than a smooth off-ramp, where roughly half of workers are expecting a gradual transition from full-time work to retirement. In actuality, 73% of the study respondents had a full stop retirement, and only 19% were able to pull off the glide path. So how do you avoid the glide path blues? I would play this in the same manner as someone who expects to work part-time after retirement. If you plan for a full stop retirement and you're still in great shape, then any glide path income that you can pull off would be icing on the cake. If your plan depends on the glide path income, then it may be time to adjust. So now that you've understood a few common misconceptions that many people face before retirement, it's time to talk about 3 things that I've seen blow up a financial plan after retirement. And they're not pretty. So check out this video where I show you 3 ways that people go broke after retirement. I'll see you there.